Thank you. I have an APB, Dean Yellen from the law school. Perfect. Come on up. Come on down, up. Thank you, I'm sorry. I did not see that you were here before, but please, the mic is yours, and I'll have our two next presenters come on stage.
Do you want they're going to come up now?
Yeah, they're going to come up now. So please, the mic is, the mic is yours.
Nice to meet you. How are you? Very good, thank you. Nice seeing you. Well, I will be very brief. I don't want to stand in the way of this great conversation you're going to have. We at the law school are really proud to be part of this event. I'm new at the law school. I just started in July, so this is obviously my first time here. But I've heard a lot about this program, and it's living up to expectations. At the law school, we have a really vibrant presence in real estate law and development. Obviously, as you all know, law plays an integral, if not always welcome, part in the real estate world. And in addition to training lawyers to be in real estate law areas, we also have a very vibrant what is an LLM degree, which is an advanced degree after law school. We've graduated hundreds and hundreds of LLM students in real estate who practice around the country and indeed around the world. We'll be next year probably launching new degree programs at the master's level for non-lawyers who want some legal training, and one of the natural areas for that will also be in real estate. So we're really delighted to be part of this and look forward to talking to you more about it later. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Tisch and Mr. Codina, who not only need no introduction, they basically asked me to give them no introduction. You know all about them. It's a thrill to see them both. I live in a building that Mr. Codina built up at the...
Mr. Tisch doesn't need an introduction. I would have appreciated one, but it's okay. Well, so it was when I driving up here and to this magnificent facility, my congratulations to the Beckman family. It takes a lot of vision, execution, and a big balance sheet to to pull this off, and Miami is lucky enough to have attracted them. Then I pulled into the lobby of this hotel. I should tell you, Jonathan Tisch has a fetish about hotel lobbies. He loves hotel lobbies. So it's great to see. I sat at a conference room and I asked to see the list of the attendees. And to think, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that I was going to come to a Loews hotel in Miami Beach and see this complex and this hotel and the kind of attendance that we have here today, I would have said, I wish, but, and here we are. What a great facility. So for me, it's a particular pleasure and privilege to be up here with Jonathan, and I think after you all hear Jonathan, you will feel equally as privileged. But I want to begin by telling so many real estate people here that a great deal of my success I owe to the Tisch family. So after I built Museum Tower in downtown Miami, which there hadn't been an office building there in 20 years, and it was very successful, I came to the conclusion that the future of Miami was not tied to downtown Miami office, this is 86, but to international airport port, and I wanted to build an industrial park, high-end, called Beacon Center. The land was owned by the Tisch family. It's a long story, but Bob Tisch, Jonathan's father, became my champion, and if it wasn't for Bob, my career would have been very, very different. I think Bob Tisch we feel quite good about seeing Jonathan and I 35 some years, maybe closer to 40, here together. So why don't you help me give a Coral Gables welcome to...
Thank you, Armando. I feel like I need to start after that last presentation offering a rebuttal for New York City. Some of us still like living there. There are development opportunities, We deal with all the issues that the students just presented, so don't forget us about New York City. The weather is better here. I get it. There's a lot going on. We have 10 hotels in the state of Florida, but I do have to stick up for my New York City. Armando is being very kind and generous, as he usually is, and to categorically say that his career would not have happened if it weren't for my father, I can say an additional kind comment about this gentleman, who truly is one of my mentors. We would not have Loews Miami Beach Hotel, which has now been open 24 plus years, if it wasn't for Armando Codina. When the opportunity presented itself for our family to come back to the marketplace, because so much of our history took place in Bal Harbour, dating back to the opening on December 1st, 1956 of the Americana Hotel, which eventually became the Sheraton Bal Harbour, which sadly got torn down to make way for the St. Regis. When my father and uncle conceptualized this hotel, once again opening in 56, which means they started construction in 54, which means that they started coming down from Atlantic City, where I was born, in 53. They had a vision for what could happen in South Florida many, many years ago. The Americana proved to be very successful, so much so that a few years after the additional the existing 475 rooms, they felt that they could put on addition. They took it up to 750 rooms. They added meeting space. And for many, many years, it was the focal part of our family. And that history relates back to Bal Harbour in the late 50s and the early 60s. So in '94, when the city of Miami Beach sent out the RFP for interested parties to become their partner, because it truly was an example of a public-private partnership that made sense. The city owned the land. The hotel company that was going to contribute equity was going to run it. We're going to become partners with the city. And it was well thought out. Neeson Kasdan, who is here today, who was mayor when our hotel opened in '98, he was on the commission that approved the hotel. A lot of thought went into it. Cy Gelber was mayor at the time. And when our family sold the Americanas, we had 3 Americanas. We had one in New York City, one in San Juan, the one in Bal Harbour. They sold those hotels in 1972 to American Airlines. American Airlines had a strategy, and Armando knows this story well, because for many years he was one of the most dynamic board members of American Airlines. They had a strategy in '72 to fly American, stay Americana. Didn't work out so well.
I didn't know we were going to get into that, but no, it didn't work.
You weren't on the board then.
I wasn't on the board
nothing
then.
to
but,
do with you.
But when I joined the board, Bob Crandall, who's iconic in the airline industry, whenever there was a bad deal bought in front of the board, he would reference the deal that the previous CEO had done when he bought. So not only he wanted the hotel, he wanted the name. And according to American Airlines, he overpaid he paid much more than should have been paid. So every time the subject came up, Bob Crandall would foam at the mouth.
One very quick story about Bob Crandall. I shouldn't digress, but it's a good story. Bob Crandall went on to become Postmaster General of the United States of America. He did that job for about 3 years. They were looking for a new Postmaster General. And after the search, they asked my father to head up the search, and it was sort of like a Dick Cheney situation. My father eventually became Postmaster General, replacing Bob Crandall. We are at the ceremony in the Postal Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. My father has been sworn in as Postmaster General of the United States under President Reagan. Bob Crandall pulls him aside and says, "Bob, you know, a couple years ago, you almost sunk my airline by sticking me with these hotels. And I knew that someday I would get back at you. Good luck being Postmaster General."
I think, so.
But I can get back to Miami real estate.
Yeah. So your entry into Miami Beach, let's chat about that. There were 3 big main competitors, and must say
Well, there were nine hotel companies submitted responses to the RFP.
but three
Yes.
big boys that were
Marriott, Hyatt,
yeah,
Sheridan.
and we were not supposed to have a chance. You
No,
remember that?
No. Armando was so perceptive in steering me as a young kid from New York City, but having experience down in this market, to talk to the right people, to bring on the right advisors, to have Al Cardenas as our lawyer at the time, to really understand the marketplace, to understand the sunshine laws, to understand how to deal with the commission that Miami Beach put together to make a recommendation to the council and eventually Cy Gelber as the mayor. And I say that if it wasn't for Armando giving me that guidance, that advice, we would have had a few stumbles along the way. And we were not supposed to get the hotel.
So, as I remember, the two of the competitors had hired all the lobbyists in the world, right? And I said to you, we're not going to out-lobby these guys, so let's just not hire any lobbyists and stay to you making the presentation I'm going to chat about. And no variances. We should not ask the city to give us any variance.
No variance.
Yeah, and when you looked at the makeup of the committee, there were a lot of people there that Gelber had put in that would not be impressed by lobbyists, would not appreciate being contacted. But I think what got us the day was the documentary from your aunt.
Well, it was my mother.
Oh, your mother.
So I'll make a very quick anecdote. So the city put together this commission, came down to June of '93, that each company was making a presentation. The city said to the 9 hotel companies, you have 1 hour to show us your capabilities in terms of operating, marketing, design, who your architects are going to be. Obviously, this is 16th Street and Collins Avenue. The Semmerits had been closed for 10 years. The building dates back to 1927, landmark building. You have to be incredibly sensitive to the Art Deco nature of the site and the environment. You have 1 hour to tell that story. And exactly 1 hour, we're going to turn on the lights, turn off the audio. You go over an hour. So I went to school in Boston. I went to Tufts University. I graduated in 1976. I was a TV producer for 3 years at the NBC station in Boston before I came back to the hotel business in January of 1980. So I learned a little bit about presenting an image, of ideas, be creative. And I said to our team at the time, we have to find a very interesting way to end our presentation. When my father and uncle left Miami in 1972, they said they're never coming back. When I was offered the opportunity to build this hotel, I said, we're going to try to come back 20 years later. So I said, we need to find a way to conclude that will be memorable for the commission and the 400 or 500 people sitting in the Miami Beach Convention Center that were interested in this project because it was going to jumpstart development in South Beach. So it was the same time that the Winter Olympics were in Lillehammer, Norway. The Olympics were on CBS at that time. And David Letterman, who had a show, sent his mother to Lillehammer, Norway to interview people, women and men on the street, about what this global event was doing in this tiny little town in Norway. And these interviews would run every night on the David Letterman show. So these men and women were being interviewed by David Letterman's mother. I'm in a meeting, the presentation's in June, this is probably March, April. I said, I have a great idea. Why don't we get Joan Tisch, my mother, God bless her, to go to Miami and interview people about what it would be like for the Tisch family and Loews Hotels to return to South Beach after an absence of some 20 years. They said, great idea, it's your mother, you deal with her. So March goes to April, April goes to May, we're now a month from the presentation, and they said, well, have you sent your mother to do her task down in Miami? I said, well, actually, she kind of scares me, which is a true story. So I haven't asked her yet. They said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I have another idea. I will dress up as my mother, and I'll do the interview. So they said, what did you just say? I said, I am going to look like Joan Tisch, who was a blonde and very attractive lady. I said, I will go down and do the interview. So one day in late May, I'm standing on 17th Street outside of our site in Miami Beach, dressed up as a woman, asking people what it would be like for Loews Hotels and the Tisch family to return. Actually, I fit right in. And so nobody really was scratching their head. So we do the interviews. I go back to New York, we edit it, and we get it down to 3.5 minutes. And it's really funny because when I'm doing the interviews, my back is to the camera, they speed up my voice, so it's a couple octaves higher. So I asked my father, who was a legend in South Florida real estate, I asked him to come down to be at the presentation, to sit in the front row, to listen to the company that he created with his brother, make a pitch to come back and build this new hotel, first new hotel in South Beach in some 35 years. So we're rehearsing the night before. It's now 10 o'clock. It's the first time that he's seen the rehearsal. He's sitting there. And we had a woman who was our head of sales and marketing who was from Texas. She had a deep Texas accent. She sets up the video perfectly. We run the video. Lights go on. And he looks at me and says, I'm not going to say what he really said, but you can use your imagination. The word starts with an F. He said, "What was that?" I said, "That's how we're ending the presentation." He said, "Have you lost your whole mind or just part of it?" I said, "That's how we're ending it." He said, "You can't show that." I said, "Well, with all due respect, you did build this company with your brother. I'm thrilled to work here with my cousins, but it says CEO on my business card, and it's my decision, and I'm showing it." Next morning, totally by happenstance, we picked cards out of a hat. We were first. Miami Beach ballroom filled with 500 people. Go through the whole presentation. We're right on time, right on schedule. The video runs, and a minute and a half into a 3-minute presentation, not one person has laughed. And I'm thinking to myself, I could go back to being a TV producer. Maybe somebody else in the hotel business would hire me. I've got a little bit of success. And then everybody got it. We won the vote 9-0. We went on for the next year to negotiate our deal with the city of Miami Beach. Loews Miami Beach is one of the most successful hotels in the country. And the next day, in the Miami Herald, because this was really big news, front page, there was a story about Loews winning the vote. And the reporter wrote, "If the CEO of Loews is willing to dress in drag, they must really care about South Beach." And I didn't show, the hotel opened on December 24th, 1998. That March, we did an opening gala to raise money for some organizations in the community. I had never shown the video to my mother until opening night, and she sort of thought I looked good.
So Bob Tisch used to call me his Miami rabbi. For about 48 hours, I was his Miami psychiatrist because we had to pull him over, but it was quite, that was transformational for Miami Beach. I think the fact that we defeated casino gamblers in the mid-'80s, Tony Goldman fought for the preservation of Art Deco, and your hotel changed Miami Beach.
Ian Schrager, who is a very old friend, Ian Schrager was building the Delano.
Yeah.
The same time that we were under construction with Loews Miami Beach Hotel, and Ian and I would call each other every couple weeks and say, "Are we crazy? Nobody else is doing anything. You're building the Delano, you're building Loews Miami Beach," and fortunately it's worked out.
Jonathan, I think this is transformational too, in a different sense. So Miami Beach was at the bottom of the, Coral Gables has not. Coral Gables has been doing pretty well, but this project, the scale, and a new hotel, full-service hotel, hasn't been one in Coral Gables. I think this is also transformational. Tell me about Coral Gables. How do you feel? And tell me about your market. What do you see here? How is it different than Miami Beach?
So I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for the Beckman family and one of our partners, Jose Antonio Perez, is sitting right here. Jose Antonio, thank you for including us in your amazing project. We had a head of development who was living in Miami Beach at the time, probably 7 years ago, reached out to me. That's how long the process has been, and said that he had heard of the Beckman family. He had heard of the project. They were going through the entitlement process. They had picked up this project in '07, '08 from another developer. It was going to be really incredibly well thought through. 2 office towers, a resi tower, lots of retail, food and beverage, and a 242-room hotel. Will we be interested? I said, it sounds great. Totally 100% different market than Loews Miami Beach Hotel. There would be no taking business from there to put here. And so we would be able to create something very unique, very different. And I came down here 2 weeks later after I heard about it, met with Carlos, met with Jose Antonio, and I would say that we had a deal on a handshake maybe 9 months later, and it's a pretty complex deal. We do have equity in this hotel, but they are the developer, they are the owners, they are absolutely amazing partners. And to go through the design process with them, starting with the architecture, morphing into the interior designs, working with RTKL, who have been here every step of the way from the first drawing to when we started checking people in at the hotel on November 3rd. We wanted to, with our partners, create something very special for Coral Gables and for the marketplace. During the week, we do a lot of corporate business. Group business has been incredibly successful. We're working on our weekend transient business. We spent a lot of time thinking through the banquet space, through the catering opportunities. Obviously, we know that social is very big in this market. So it's not an accident that we have 2 ballrooms that are basically the same size. So for a meeting like this, you can have people gather in one room to go through the agenda, the point of view of the conference, and then feed them in another room. And we opened on November 3rd, as I mentioned. I think we have done at least 1 wedding every weekend. And we are thrilled to be in another sector of South Florida that once again does not cannibalize Loews Miami Beach Hotel, but they complement each other. Mutlahan Kuchik, who is sitting right over here, is our area director. He is responsible for both properties. Jonathan Moraz, who is in our development department, put the deal together, working very closely with Agave. And the response, Armando, has been terrific, and we are very excited. And to have a group like this, 90 days after we're open, and another wedding this weekend. We have all kinds of social events, so we are thrilled with the response. And we put so much time and thought into designing not only the rooms, the lobby. Lobbies today are gathering spots for people. Technology has taken over our lives, as we all know, but people still can be connected, but be in a space where they see other human beings. And the response to our food and beverage offerings, our Americana restaurant, our bar, have really been so gratifying for us to sit back now after 7 years of design and construction, and I give Agave credit. They did not blink during COVID. They did not stop. They did not miss 1 construction day. They made sure that the site was safe, that it was secure for the men and women on the construction team, and they opened on time, and I'm happy to say, for all of us, on budget.
So I'm curious about the challenges. Last time you and I had breakfast at the Regency, I remember the captain who had been there a long time, you remember?
He actually, that's so funny you mentioned that. Sam, who was one of our waiters at the Regency, today, after 42 days, was his last day at the Loews Regency Hotel.
42 years.
Excuse me, 42 years.
So,
42 years.
So that's to the point that, so he was kind of hanging around, and I got the sense that you were happy to have him, but he remembered when I used to have breakfast, remember with your father. So when you go to a Loews and Regency, there's a lot of people that have been there a long, long time. So tell me the challenge about staffing a hotel in Miami today.
Well, opening this hotel during the stress on the supply chain and during the worker shortages that I'm sure everybody in the room here are keenly aware of was a bit of a challenge. We have, a little further north of here in Orlando, we have 9 hotels, 8,000 rooms in Orlando in a joint venture with Comcast, NBC, Universal. So there, pre-COVID, we had 4,500 team members. We got down to, I don't know, 400 during the period that we had to close for COVID, and restaffing there was very difficult. Loews Miami Beach, a similar challenge. Opening a new hotel, also a similar challenge because we had no track record. And obviously, anybody who works in the food and beverage area, they want to know what the tip structure is going to be. They want to know what their base is. They want to know what they're going to make on tips. And having the metropolis, if you will, of Miami and all the other areas, whether it's Design District, Wynwood, South Beach, Downtown, Midtown, now Surfside, Aventura.
Don't forget Doral.
Doral, exactly.
Thank you.
We weren't partners in Doral, that's true. So there's a lot of competition for women and men, especially in the area of food and beverage and lodging. But our team put together an approach to bringing team members on board. And so today we sit here in a 242-room hotel with 170 team members. And we want to be an employer of choice. We spend a lot of time working on issues of equality, of transparency, of communication. We want our team members to know what we expect of them and what they can expect of us. And when we do our surveys, fortunately, we are highly rated. The Orlando Sentinel says that our 9 hotels in Orlando are always top 5 best employer in town. And we're very proud of that. But it goes back to your friend Bob Tisch, my father, Larry Tisch, because that was the culture they created some 75 years ago with their parents, with Sadie and Al Tisch. And as you know, as of January 1st, you and I now have the same title.
Yes.
We are both executive chairs of our company. I stepped down 6 weeks ago as CEO of Loews Hotels. My nephew, Alex Tisch, is now the president and CEO, and he is the 4th generation of our family to have day-to-day responsibility of the hotel company. So we take this very seriously. And one of my missions and one of my tasks with my new title, fancy title of executive chairman, is to continue to focus on why people might want to be part of our team and why people like Sam Metropolis stays at the Loews Regency Hotel for 42 years.
So, as you know, I relate better to the boss boys and the waiters than I do to CEOs. And I would tell the people that are working here that they're in the right place because of the culture. So let's talk about culture because they're going to be turning that clock on for a second. So I've learned, I told you that, and it's true that my career would have been different, and the Tisch family and Bob were instrumental. But on the personal side, he just said 4th generation. How many families do you know that by the time they get to the 3rd, forget the 4th, they have destroyed a lot of value? When you're around the Tisch family, I don't know how they have managed that each and every one of them has fire on their belly. And they have a respect that even when there's a difference, it stays at the door. And they have a culture of respect, transparency, humbleness that I learned a lot from. So succession, that's been a very important piece of, my CEO's here, so I got to be careful. I don't know if your CEO lets you do, my CEO gives me a lot of rope.
Right. Yeah.
I do a special project. Tell us about that family value. How have you been able to foster 4 generations, and how each and every one of you have fire on their belly, every one of you have worked in different sectors, and yet the family is so united.
Bob and Larry Tisch grew up in Brooklyn, New York with very little. And with their parents, my grandmother Sadie was a working woman before it became something that people were allowed to do. And she didn't care. She was going to make her contributions, which were many in terms of the success of the family. But they started with nothing. They were in the, as we affectionately say in New York, when you have a background like mine, we were in the schmata business. We were in the, that's Yiddish for the rag trade. That's Yiddish for the fashion industry. And that's where they started. And they heard about an opportunity after World War II to take over running a summer camp in a town called Lakewood, New Jersey, which is southwest of New York City. This is right, 1946, right after the war ended. They didn't know anything about running a summer camp, but they said, let's give it a shot, let's try. So through their grit and their determination, and my father was called Mr. Outside in terms of the partnership because he was gregarious, he was warm, as you deeply know. He knew the names of every one of our team members, he knew where their kids went to college, and he was always front of the house, back of the house, dealing with our clients. And my uncle was referred to as Mr. Inside, who had the most amazing financial acumen. He did this to you all the time. He would ask you 5 questions about your business, and he would know more about your business than you would.
I've seen the movie.
So that combination, their tenacity, their determination led them to become successful. I've got a brother and a sister. I've got 4 cousins. We went from Atlantic City to Miami, as I mentioned, to New York when they took over Loews Theaters in 1959. That's where we got the name Loews. And to this day, 3 of us work in the business of my generation. I am co-chairman of the board of the parent company, which is a public company, with my cousin Andrew. His brother Jim, my cousin Jim, is CEO of the public company, and then until 6 weeks ago, I was day-to-day at Loews Hotels. What we learned from Joan and Bob Tisch and Billy and Larry Tisch was to treat people with respect, to be honest, to give up a little in terms of your upside, to protect your downside. And we never forgot that. And the compassion that we have for the communities where we live, for the communities where we operate our businesses, is real. And it was an early, easy lesson to see because our parents were doing it. They were the role models. And today, where there are, once again, 7 of us, there are now spouses and children and grandchildren. So we're now at 42 people that are members of the family. The next generation, in addition to Alex taking over as president and CEO of Loews Hotels, his cousin Ben, who is Jim's son, is executive vice president of finance for the corporation. And so they're 2 of the next generation that are involved. But we actually like each other. And we socialize with each other. And we cut each other a wide berth. And that's important in terms of the contributions we can make at the business, but it also is important in terms of how we look at supporting the communities where we all live. We each have our own interests, and that allows a lot of good work to be done in terms of culture, medicine, education. We don't trip over each other. We don't need to ask each other's permission because anything that we do is respectful of others in the family and goes to the beliefs that, in my case, that I have with my wife Lizzie and our 3 kids and myself.
So I think this audience and I could listen to you for a long time. I told you, Andrea sat me here, so when she walked up there and signaled, and she's rearranged that microphone about 4 times now. So I think our time has come, and we didn't get into, but I wish we could have talked a little bit about their charitable. They're the most charitable, and we'll save that for the next time. Jonathan, welcome to Miami now. Coral Gables and Miami.
Yeah.
I hope someday you will.
I think there's some questions.
No,
some
right.
questions.
But
No,
well,
please,
Yep.
please
Okay.
also, talk about charity, being the benefactor
Okay.
of charity. We always want to hear about people who give money, especially to educational institutions. While they are talking about that, please send me questions.
31
in
years
that.
on the board of Tufts University. Second capital campaign that I'm co-chairing. Chairing the capital campaign for my boarding school. The hotel school at NYU is named after me, so I can keep going, but there's always room for more.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I could please have, if there are questions from the audience, I know that I have one that I have got to ask since I'm a big booster of Miami and South Florida. You've got South Beach, you've got Coral Gables. Where do you actually, both of you, see really the most potential now? And I know Armando's answer is going to be Doral, but in addition to Doral, I mean, where do you see the most potential here?
Clearly, as we heard from the students to open this session, everywhere. It's South Florida. It's Florida. And people want to be here. The numbers are compelling. Obviously, I know so many people that have left New York. I'm trying to bring them back. I'm trying to drag them back. My wife and I have a home in Palm Beach, so I know that market pretty well. And this is an area of the country where they're doing things right. There are issues, there are infrastructure issues, there are issues related to the dynamic growth. But as I mentioned a moment ago, when you just look at the South Florida market and all of the sub-markets of Wynwood, the Design District, Downtown, Surfside, Doral, Aventura, Bal Harbor, South Beach, I mean, it's incredible. And the growth is going to continue. The opportunities are going to continue. There's big money coming in here. I had lunch with Moot right before the session, and to listen to the new hotels that are being talked about with big names like Aman and Cheval Blanc and Bulgari, and these are really well-financed companies. Now, we're in a fortunate position when we expand, which we're doing in Texas, because that's the other area of dynamic growth. We have a 300-room hotel called Live by Loews Arlington in Texas, Arlington, Texas. The Texas Rangers, the ball team, are our partners, along with Tisch. We're a parking lot away from AT&T, which twice a year is difficult for me, being co-owner of the New York Giants, but we get over that. That hotel has done so well that we are now building an 888-room hotel with 250,000 square feet of meeting space right next to it. That will open exactly a year from now. And then in our partnership up in Orlando with Universal, we're always looking for more opportunity. So there are pockets of growth in this country. You're all in the real estate business. You understand the ebb and flow of capital. We're in a fortunate position that Loews can be our sponsor. Loews Corporation can provide equity for Loews Hotels. In Arlington, Texas, our contractor, J.E. Dunn out of Kansas City, came to us in June of 21. We had a guaranteed max contract, and they said, unless you start construction in a month, we can't guarantee the prices. They obviously saw what was happening with supply chain, with inflation. We didn't have a construction loan in place at the time. So Loews Corporation fronted Loews Hotels $240 million of equity. 6 weeks later, we had a $300 million construction loan from MetLife, and that hotel opens, as I mentioned, a year from now. So we are in the fortunate position to be able to access capital, and when we expand in Orlando, you've got two very good sponsors in Comcast and Loews that we're able to, we each have access to capital, but when it comes to the debt markets, we can navigate those in a way that works for us.
It's a great country. Great country.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Thank you. It is, very much. So I have a question that strays a little bit from hotels, and I know that is your expertise, but whether or not you are searching, either of you actually, for opportunities on a personal investment basis into other asset classes, or the hotels are where you see the most potential?
I personally am not. Unfortunately, I own a piece of many unsuccessful restaurants in New York. A few Broadway plays. One of my sons is a Broadway producer. I wouldn't recommend either in terms of capital appreciation. And so I'm sticking to the hotel business.
Yes. Armando, what do you-
I stick to what I know. We do have a venture. We own half of 17 dealerships, mostly in the Northeast, with someone that knows what they're doing, but only because we have that partner when we do it. So I stick to what I know.
And I know that there was not a particular introduction, but Armando is breaking ground on Regency Tower.
Regency Park. It's a subliminal. I remember if you had never been to breakfast at the Regency, that's the part. I remember going there often with Bob. You sat down. George Steinbrenner had a table. Bloomberg before it was. One anecdote. So there was a young developer. His name was Donald Trump. The Forbes list of wealthiest people have come out, and he comes over and says to Bob, Bob introduced me to him like 3 or 4 times, and he never remembered, but he walks up and said to Bob, I want to congratulate you for being on the list of Forbes with me. And then when he turned around, I don't want to tell you what Bob Tisch said, because he couldn't be, I don't want to repeat a conversation and the language. But it was an unbelievable place. What you saw there having breakfast with Bob Tisch, the history that you saw and the people.
The term power breakfast actually was conceptualized, was conceived in the dining room of the Regency Hotel in the mid-'70s. I grew up in the hotel. I literally grew up in the hotel. When I went to boarding school or when I went to college in Boston, I'd come home, I would come back to the Regency Hotel. I call myself the male Loews, and so I knew the place pretty well. In the mid-'70s, when New York City was on the brink of bankruptcy and was about to default on their bonds, my father, Lou Rudin, Jerry Spire, Felix Rodin, they all came together, Percy Sutton, to save New York, literally to save New York. And they would say, well, we'll meet on Tuesday, and they kept saying, where should we meet? And my father said, well, why don't we meet at the Regency, because all I have to do is take the elevator. And so that's what was the first notion of the term power breakfast, and the term comes from the Loews Regency Hotel. So I was there 3 times this week. The place is still packed. As a sign of maybe it was time for me to step down as CEO, I don't know as many people as I used to. It's a little glaring to see all these young people there, but it's great. The place is packed. But to see Armando, Codina, and Bob Tisch breaking bread at the Regency Hotel, that image is gracefully blazoned in my head.
Thank you. I know there must be things that people in the audience would like to ask, either through the app, or I think that we have microphones somewhere. If you got, or if you can stand up and speak loudly, that will work too.
Yes, Armando, you belong to a class of 14,000
I think there's a microphone coming.
Taliban kids that actually came to the United States from Cuba. I'm one of them. And I've always wanted to actually ask this question. How much that experience drove you to success, to come without your parents and do the things that you did in the life that you have actually were able to build here?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, let me say thank you for the question, but I'm lucky that my mother had that's the ultimate sacrifice a parent can make, to send their kid on a company. And because of that choice, everything that I have, I owe to this country. And I can imagine the alternative, what would have been. Of the 14,000+ kids that came on a company, mostly boys, because Cuban parents were reluctant to send girls, there was a group that were highly traumatized. And so there was not a lot of metal, but you were either traumatized or you came out of the experience a lot stronger. I happened to have, after the first night that I spent in an orphanage before they sent me to a foster home, I got beat up pretty badly the next morning, and I swear nobody would ever do that to me again, and that I would. So the experience is part of what I am, and unfortunately for many kids, the trauma was a problem. For me, it was a character builder, and I thank my mother for having sent me here.
Anybody else care to ask a question of either of our two esteemed guests?
See a hand over there.
I do in the back. There's somebody right behind you with a microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Butler. I'm a business reporter with the Miami Herald. The question is for both of you gentlemen. But as the hospitality industry in South Florida was so affected by COVID in the pandemic, we saw a huge influx of people from just the West Coast and the Upper East Coast come to Miami, pushing people in local hospitality jobs out of work. How are wages increasing at the Loews hotel properties to better support rising property costs in Miami? Because a lot of people that were working in these hotels simply cannot afford to live in the same city in which they work.
We obviously canvass the markets where we have our hotels. Our wages are market-driven, and we also believe that we offer good benefits to our team members. We treat them well, as I mentioned a few moments ago, and we had many open positions for many months, and we were looking for team members, as were other businesses that are rooted in hospitality, in F&B, in restaurants. We are now seeing more people that, for a variety of reasons, want to come back to the lodging industry. Remember, we were closed. The lodging industry, the hotel business was shut down. And we did the best we could for many, many months to support our team members. And today they still thank us for that understanding of what they were going through. We are now starting to see more people come back to the industry. We lost a lot of people to healthcare. We lost a lot of people to the Amazons of the world. And today people are saying, I don't want to get paid X and throw stuff into a box for 8 hours a day. And they are coming back into our industry. They're coming back. Obviously, we see it because of all the layoffs in tech, what crypto is going through. So more people are saying, maybe I can make a career in lodging. And that's something that we talk about a lot. That's why I'm so proud to be associated with the hotel school at NYU and have spoken on every major campus that has a lodging program to articulate a vision how you may come into our industry in an entry-level role, but the ability to grow your career exists, and we have to do more in that area. At NYU, we're working with Howard University in terms of articulating what the travel industry, lodging, hotel business can mean, and that's incumbent upon us as the leaders of the industry to not just get the people into the jobs, but talk to them about how you can make a really good career in travel and tourism. Anything
else? The lighting is nice for you, but it's very dark for me, so I can't quite see if I have any. There's a question over here. Here comes somebody up the aisle behind you with a mic.
Mr. Codina, Mr. Tisch, again, thanks for joining us today. Armando, we were at a function a few weeks ago where you described, we'll call it the imaginary table, of people who were meaningful to you throughout your life and career. We've got many students in here today. What are some of the personal attributes that you'd like to maybe share with them that you've seen in very successful people throughout your career?
So, by the way, at that table, imaginary table with my mother, I sat Bob Tisch next to my mother. So, listen, at the times that we're living in, so there are many things that I could say, but what I would say, given the times that we're living in, is don't have a sense of entitlement. So we live in a place, a moment in time that there's so many people coming to the workplace that have a sense of entitlement that I certainly did not have when I started out. So and I hate to say something on the negative, but I think that's a very important attribute today, to come in and take what you can get and work at it harder than anybody else. That was my mantra, that nobody was going to outwork me in whatever job I had. So that would be my number one advice today.
And John, what would you add to that?
When I have the opportunity to speak to college students, there are a couple things that I remind them of. That they are focused on a career. They probably have a major, whether it's undergraduate, grad, but there's no guarantee that when they leave that institution or when they're done with the program that they're going to get the job that they want. And my thought for them is take a job, any job, because you learn through every single experience. And we can all make plans for ourselves and make plans for our family, but we have no clue what's going to happen when we leave this room, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week. So you do the best you can. But by having experiences that just educate you about life, about business, about interacting with other people, you will benefit. When I was a TV producer in Boston, I didn't know that that would benefit me later in life by having to design hotels. I have built and designed 17 hotels. Pick the architects, pick the interior designers, some with partners, some without partners. And those years of creating images for a TV screen for 3 years in Boston were very beneficial. So just get a job, get out there and learn. You can learn from people. And as part of that, don't talk all the time. Just keep your mouth shut every once in a while and listen, because people have lots of good things to say, but if you're talking, you're not going to be so prone to listening. And the last piece of this that I tell people, when I started in 1980 as a sales assistant at Loews Hotels, I had a boss who lives up in Aventura, actually, and he was my boss in 1980, and he said, John, and this is 1980, so this is obviously way before technology. This is when people were typing and sending letters, they were handwritten, writing a note. And he said, never start a paragraph with the word I. Because when you start a paragraph with the word I, that immediately indicates to the person that you're communicating with that you think you're more important than they are. And think about it, when you're now going to send an email, a text, go through the mental exercise of trying not to start a paragraph with the word I. It trains your mind to be more inclusive, to be more collaborative, and to really have a sort of a different way of understanding how you should communicate.
That is absolutely fabulous advice, especially for the students here, but I think really for almost everybody here. So with that, let me ask you to thank our second panel.